Hello everyone and welcome to another Atomic Mass Transmissions Live. I'm Will Schick, Director of Product Development for Atomic Mass Games. Excited that you can be here on this fine Wednesday afternoon for us and morning, noon, or night, wherever it is for you. Today we're going to be picking up where we left off during my last stream, which was 2 Wednesdays ago at this point, where we were repainting some X-Wing ships in an Aayla Secura inspired squadron colors. So with that in mind, let's just hop off this camera here. Let's dive into our paint. We've got some things to cover as well. I have some really cool Star Wars, hashtag my Star Wars Legion painting pics to show off as well at the end of the thing. So we're just gonna go right in and get things started. So to give you a little refresher on the work that we did previously, getting the focus. So these are the 2 V19 Torrents that we painted on the last stream. Again, these colors are really heavily inspired by kind of looking at reference of Aayla Secura's Eta-2, Eta-2, Ida-2, I don't know, however you say it, ETA-2, her Eta-2 Ectus class starfighter. So again, we kind of made these up on the fly, but we're going to now go in and we're going to actually paint this Eta-2 right here into these colors so that it'll all match up, and then we'll have ourselves a really cool looking little squadron that can go on the table. And we can knock those out, and then ideally here in the future we'll get a chance to play some games with them, and I can put them on the table against maybe somebody's separatist droids. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to start off with the base coats, and for the base coats I'm going to be using, not that one, where did it go? There we go. So I'm going to be using this Nakar from Scale, which is a nice kind of off-white. It's a bit of a taupe. So with that said, I'm just going to start with that. We're going to make a base coat down. Again, looking at kind of the things, it's a little bit of a lighter gray. This is the same thing that we used on the V19s. So this will give us a nice, really solid base coat to work from. From there, we'll do some highlighting, we'll do the blues, and then we will do some dark lining, and that's really where all of it pays off in the end, is in that dark lining. So with this, I'm not going to be super careful with it. I'm just going to put this everywhere, because I can build up my base over everything. Now, to get this started, what I did was I simply took my airbrush and I just simply sprayed a Vallejo light gray primer over the top of the ship itself. So as you can see, all of the details still absolutely there. I didn't lose anything. So you can reprime X-Wing ships if you want to do repaints of your own and you want to start from whole cloth like I'm doing here. It's very simple to do. You just simply want to make sure that you're keeping a really light hand with the primer. Use some good, like, sandable automotive primer if you don't have access to an airbrush, which a lot of people don't. Any kind of sandable automotive primer is a great primer source for rattle can primer for miniatures. Of course, there's a ton of different primers that you can get at your hobby game store as well, from various companies and stuff like that. So it's really up to you and your preferences as to what kind of primer you like to use. But again, you don't have to break the bank on it. The biggest trick with primer is to get something that has a fine pigment, and that's why I often say sandable automotive primer is a really great one. It has a really nice fine pigment to it. It's available everywhere. And of course, the second trick is to make sure that you keep a light hand when applying it. So don't just go in there and spray directly at the miniature. You want to make sure that when you're priming things, whether it's an X-Wing ship or a Legion Mini, anything like that, that you're coming in and you want to take the primer and you want to do it in stripes, basically. Think about like going from left to right or right to left, depending on which way feels more natural to you. So you start spraying from one side, you come across, and you do really light coats like that. And what that will do is it'll minimize blasting one area of the miniature with a ton of paint. So it'll improve even coverage. It also gives you a lot of control. Of course, like, one of the big things is you're not going to get it done with one coat, much like most miniature painting in general. You're looking for like 2 thin coats all the time to make sure that you're preserving that detail and keeping everything safe and sound. So that is how you can get started on prepping your X-Wing ships for repainting. Of course, the other option is, let's say you decided that on this Eta-2 that you liked the white base that's already on there from the factory, the stock kind of white color that comes with it. To me, that didn't feel quite right for the Aayla colors that I had seen in my reference photos that I picked as the ones that I liked from online. But that said, you could absolutely keep those colors, and if you wanted to do that, instead of repriming the whole ship, what you can do is you can grab some matte sealant, so any kind of like artist matte dull coat, or effectively any kind of finishing product. So anything that you would normally seal your minis or a painting with or anything like that. There's a whole bunch of different options. I prefer the matte stuff. You could use a satin if you really wanted to. It doesn't really make a huge difference. But what you do is you spray that sealant over the top of the miniature using the exact same techniques as before. And what that allows you to do is it just creates a primer bond for the paint that you apply over it. So it won't obscure or cover any of the paint that's already on there, but it will provide a nice, even, smooth layer of primer coat for the rest of your paints to be applied over it. And at that point, you can just go in and you can determine, okay, well, I want the red areas to be blue, so I'm just going to paint those areas. And it becomes very formulaic in terms of just changing the colors on certain things. So especially if you want to take your red squadron X-Wings and make them green squadron. Simply going in, very simply, giving them that initial matte primer coat, and then coming back through and just going over the red areas with a nice green color, and building up the colors that way. You save all the time that you would have otherwise on repainting the entire hull of the ship. You maintain that cohesion with the rest of your X-Wings, but you've changed the squadron colors to be the color that you want to represent the squadron that you want them to be. Really quick, really easy, a great way to kind of start playing with painting ships in X-Wing or just painting miniatures in general, because you get really nice results really quick. It makes kind of figuring out the composition for the ship also really easy, because you have all those guidelines to go. Okay, so it looks like we have a pretty good base coat of this going on. I'm just going to do one quick over. So one more really thin coat just to make sure everything's even, because this is going to be kind of the foundation that everything's coming from. And then we're going to go in and we're going to mix in some titanium white into this color to build up some highlights. And I'm mostly going to focus on the top of the ship and less so on the bottom of the ship. And the reason being is that for 99% of the time when people see this ship or when I look at it or we're playing with it, it's always going to be from this angle. You're almost never going to see it from the bottom angle. So you'll notice, like on my V19 Torrents, I really didn't do much. I added flat colors to the bottom just so that it would look right sitting on the top, but all of the detail and the shading and stuff I spent all of my time on the top half of the ship, because that's the spot that everyone's going to see. We talk about this a lot too, realizing that you don't have to paint every area to any kind of like super high standards, because you really want to focus your attention and your hobby time if you're just trying to get paint on a mini and make it look really cool and good for play on the spaces where people are going to see it. And people are just going to look at the top. They're not going to look at the bottom. So with that in mind, you can kind of maximize your hobby time, your painting time, to make sure that you are getting the most bang for your time spent. So again, I'm just going to take more of this Nakar. I'm going to start adding in some titanium white or some flat white, doesn't really matter. That's the Bob Ross, like artist white talking, titanium white. It's always the big one. And I'm looking kind of for like a 50-50 here of mix to kind of build up those colors. And I'll use the V19 Torrents a little bit as my guidepost as well. And then for this color, we just kind of want to come in and we want to start blocking out so I'm just going to go over the whole area again, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to try to avoid hitting any of the deeper recess lines. And even though I'm going to go back and I'm going to shade those down with a dark line wash, it's still best right now if I just kind of like spend a little time and think about it, because it's going to let me see where those lines are. It's also going to preserve that detail because I'm not going to get as much paint in them. And that can be something that you need to worry about, especially if you wind up thinning your paints not enough or anything like that. Oh, let's see, so that's the wrong. So it looks like on my reference, this panel here has the lighter white. And so we're just gonna build up these colors. And this was the big one, the cockpit area. I noticed a couple of different versions of it. A couple of which had it be like this really dark gray, which we did do on the V19 Torrents. But now looking at some new concepts and color art of this ship, I see that it's like basically the same gray as everything else. So I'm just going to do that so that I don't have to worry about messing around with the other colors. But overall, if we wanted to, we can go back in and we can change that as well. So it looks like these interior panels are just going to get kind of like a wash as well. And again, this is just really simple and quick. We're going to go in and detail everything out in a little bit as well. I'm just going to get going. The happy little astromech can be any color you want it to be. In fact, we're gonna copy the image that I have up of Aayla Secura's. Eta looks like kind of a red metallic and a gold. So we'll see how close we can get to that on this little guy right here. He's so wee. So instead of mixing more highlight color into my paint, what I'm doing is I'm going back through and I'm doing a second coat. And this is another trick that you can do if you keep your paints nice and thin, is paints have a translucency to them, so they're not pure opaque. They're always going to show that layer underneath. And kind of what we do a lot on the streams is we paint a lot of the Legion miniatures and other character miniatures utilizing a wash, like a pin washing technique. So we do a zenith highlight, and then we go through, we water down paints into washes, and we use the washing technique to like really quickly build up highlights and shadows that we can play from there. Not exactly an approach that I would take on an X-Wing mini, although you could. Instead, what I'm doing is I'm just keeping my paints really thin, not quite to wash consistency, but so that I have that translucency. And then what I can do is over several layers I can go through and I can build up the colors to an opacity that I want. And so this gives me a lot of control over how things look, and I can kind of do really quick blends by feathering out my colors. So you'll notice like the way that I do this is I concentrate, I want the brightest color to be on the edge of the ship. So I simply start my brush stroke halfway from the edge, which leaves the dark color on the interior and allows the vast majority of the paint to build up on the exterior or the edge of the ship. And so this creates a really nice like false highlight and a really good blend because of the scale of the ship itself. We're not really in a situation where we have to worry so much about all these really fine details. And that's another thing, knowing the scale at which you're working at and kind of what the eye is going to be able to see is really important too. So we want our highlights and our shades to be pretty stark. It's almost like you think about animation and stuff, where it's not a flat color, but you have these really like stylistic highlights. And the eye typically really likes it when, especially on ships like this, the brightest section is on the exterior, because that's where we think the light would hit, and then it gets darker towards the interior, so to speak. So again, by simply building up these colors on the edges, you're going to see that it's already getting a lot more form and definition. We're creating some volumes on those flat panels, and it's really starting to come together. And when we do our next highlight, we'll be able to go to an even brighter level, and then from there, we'll do kind of the same technique where we'll let that translucency of the paint really play. And again, we're not as worried too much about everything else that's going on. Now I am going to flip this over, and we're going to do the underside really quick. I'm not going to be as careful on this side, as cautious. I don't want it to be the completely flat color, because there would be some light and stuff here. So this will probably be the only highlight layer that I do on the grays, but it will be enough that during play and stuff, even if you see it on its flight stand and on the base, that it's going to look like we spent enough time detailing the underside of the ship itself. And the other reason that this doesn't work out very well on camera is because of the way the camera is angled. All you really see is my big fat knuckles. I know that's not, particularly exciting, so we're just going to move quickly past this part. So there, hopefully you can see now when we get back into focus Just a really quick, easy highlight. I'm going to go back. I'm going to pull more of my white, pull a little bit more of my gray. We're going to mix up a really brighter, like a nice, not quite white, but definitely a probably 70-30 mix of our white to our nacre. We're going to thin that out to where it's flowing nice and smooth. And then we'll just start coming in and we'll start building up some highlighting. So, get that going in, and we'll just start going. So again, I'm just simply looking at kind of halfway up the panel that I want to paint. Let's see, we have a stray hair. My brush is shedding. Oh no. Oh no. So I'm just going to pick those areas and then I'm just going to start building them up. And again, we're going to figure out where our blue is going to go next. So I'm not going to worry about that at the moment. I'm simply going to do this, like, because it's such a small mini and we have plenty of time with an hour, I'm just going to pretend like everything is white, and then as I go back through, this allows me to check my reference a little less. And of course, when I go back through and say, oh well, this section is white, this section is blue, my whites are already done, so I won't have to worry about going back through and like maybe highlighting back up an area of white that I missed because I didn't do it when I was doing this area because I thought it was going to be blue, and then I have to make that really hard decision of, do I stray from my source material? The answer is yes. Always stray from the source material. It's your vision. I mean, I looked at tons of pieces of art for this ship, and all of them were slightly different as well. So honestly, you know, you do the version that makes you excited and happy, and if something strikes your fancy and your eye more than something else, go with that. You know, I already talked about how the canopy here in several of the images that I found was a dark gray and very distinct from the white of the ship itself. But we're not doing that here. And then the other thing that I think we're going to do, because we're rebels, not yet, but we will be, is instead of doing the canopy kind of a dark black, like a smoky black, I'm going to copy the same golden color that I used for the V19 turret canopies because I think that just looks really cool. And it's very, very easy to paint, but I think it looks really striking. It looks really nice with the blue and the white. So that's going to be my alteration to the ship. Alright, I think we're looking really good. This is an X-Wing ship for those asking in the chat. I'm going to do one last coat of my thinned out white. I think it's okay if her ship is just a little bit cleaner and brighter than the V19s. She is a fancy Jedi after all. She probably has somebody cleaning her ship after every battle. Have to imagine. It's like a Batman. World War I pilots always had a Batman from on the English side of things, I think. I'm not sure if it was like everyone, but I know it's definitely an English pilot thing. They had a Batman. Took care of all their stuff, cleaned their bunks, all that kind of good stuff. So I'm sure Jedis have the same thing. Maybe it's a droid, though, instead of a person. That would seem right. Put it down. Leave that one kind of dark. Put it down. If I want to get really fancy, I could start taking my secondary brush and start blending this stuff out. But I don't feel like that's super necessary here. Because again, the scale at which this ship is, we don't have to worry about perfect blends. We just want that eye to catch everything and see what's going on. So, whoop. I don't know if we make a mistake like we just did there. We got a little heavy-handed with it. Let's come back here and do that. Okay. Oh, yeah. Venators have automatic car washes for their ships. You got to look good on the parade ground. There's zero question. Get all that carbon scoring off your ship and stuff, you know? It's just required. Okay. I'm pretty happy with this. I think we're looking pretty good. that little area on the inside of the wing would be in shadow, so I don't have to worry about that too much. Just going to go back through, and I'm going to do some really quick. I'm just kind of doing some really quick sidelining to just really pop out the edges of that, of the ship panels on the very exterior. So like right here where the two little front prong wings are and stuff like that. I'm just kind of like adding more opacity to those by doing more and more paint layers. Okay, so I think we are good. Do a quick comparison to our other ships. So I think that's looking really good. Our colors are pretty close. And as we add those dark lines into the panel highlights, it's going to look really good. Oh, that's the Padawan job. They also make the Padawans fly with them, though. So I mean, it seems doubly unfair. Not only do they have to wash the ship, they also have to engage in battle. I mean, the true Batman, you know, of the Royal Air Force never fought. They just hung out at home and made sure, you know, tea was ready and stuff. Okay. I'm going to be using this turquoise for kind of the foundation of our blue. And this cap off. Put a little out. Okay. So, yep, for those asking, I just did a simple gray airbrush primer over the top, but you could use a rattle can as well. Any kind of good hobby primer or sandable airbrush primer applied carefully will work out great for you. Alternatively, if you want to maintain some of the original colors, just use a matte sealant. Okay, so here we go. So it looks like, following our reference, this panel here, it's going to be blue. This is where we're just kind of going to go slow and careful. That's going to be the exciting part of our stream. So I do want to block this stuff out. So that brings this one over here. And if I get a little into the cracks and stuff, that's not a big deal. I am going to do my best to try to avoid hitting any of our white panels. If I do, I'm going to have my secondary brush in my teeth so that I can very quickly blend it out and erase any of my mistakes. Then it looks like this panel, ooh, it's a little different. So it looks like this panel here wants to be blue. Yes, maybe. Yeah, why not? So we're going to do this panel's blue. Nope. So you see I went a little too farther than I wanted to, so I'm just going to come in with that brush and straighten out my line really quick. I know, there's no mention of Huldra blue. It's the worst. We did use Huldra blue on the V19s. I don't know if I'm actually going to use Huldra blue on this one or not, though. I haven't decided. Okay, so we come across here, down over here. So we're just doing our best to color match and mix and match here. So do that. It's like all of the work we did on these back wings was not as important because I'm going to do these colors as well. And this is going to be streaky, and that's okay. We're going to do a couple of coats. So if it's a little patchy at first, that's fine. We want that. We want to keep our colors nice and loose so we don't lose any detail, and they're easy to work with, and they're flowing really well. This is just part of it. Alright, so we'll do that. And then we're going to come back through, we'll do a little bit of a blue wash on these areas just to darken them up. And it looks like we want these wings to be blue as well. So that's what we'll do. So honestly, if I was to go back, knowing what I know now, I probably would have done the interior panels as blue and the exterior panels as white and just changed the concept to suit what I like. But that's okay. This is what we're doing, and I'm fine with it. Ooh. A little bit of a mistake there. There we go. A little too excited. So you can see I just used my finger to wipe off the paint. Totally acceptable. Let's come in and the bottom of these wings too. And depending on how we do on time, I might not worry so much about the bottom of the ship, and I can just go back and clean it up later. But when it comes to like making these lines nice and crisp, I'll just kind of play with it. So those panel lines don't extend everywhere. It's part of the casting process and how the ship is engineered for assembly and stuff. So it's not always going to look exactly like you think it would. So sometimes we'll just have to come in and, oh my gosh, that was a huge mistake. Huge mistake! That's why I keep this brush handy. I mess up. So our brush is really not cooperating with us. I'm keeping a good point. So if your brush starts to split on you while you're painting, that typically means that there's some paint that's drying in the bristles. So the best thing that you can do to try to start, man, this wing really doesn't want to cooperate with me. By it, I mean I don't seem to be wanting to paint it very well. Is just go back and wash it out. For those asking kind of how to do repaints on X-Wing stuff, you can paint over the top of the existing paint. You can reprime. You really don't need to do any kind of stripping. That's mostly unnecessary because the detailing on them is really deep, and of course as long as you keep your paints nice and thin, like you should anyway, no matter what you're painting, you want to use thin paints, not thick paints. You won't lose any of the detailing. So any of that is totally fine. Okay, so now we're going to come back over here. Looks like we're going to be doing this one. And a blue. I'm going to do this here. And this is going to be a pretty unique Secura paint job, but we're kind of following the miniature itself, and of course the artist's interpretations of the ship and everything else are a little different, so we're just going to play with it. But we're getting a nice, like, kind of mimicking those Twi'lek tentacle kind of feels here, I think, with these two coming in. What that marking? This wouldn't have happened if I'd used Holder Blue. Maybe that's the problem. My brain is just revolting here in terms of, like, where's the Holdra? Come on now. Want to get that? Do we want to do anything else in the blue? I feel like the answer is yes, but what is that exactly? I think we're going to do this. I think we're going to come here. Get this, that. Just kind of come around. Come over here. Look at this. Come around. And we'll make a fake end line before that strip that goes down, because I don't want to connect that blue to the other blue. Okay, so now we're just going to do pass 2 really quick. Solid up those colors. So it's just be a quick second coat. And a couple of thin coats is always better than one thick coat. You're going to have a lot more control. You're not going to obscure that detail. It's just going to be better. I kind of feel like I want that canopy to have some color too. I just can't quite decide. You know what? Screw it. We're going to, at the very least, we're going to do this section with the blue. Because I feel like we want it. So we're going to take it. Hold Your Blue does basically paint itself. I mean, for all the jokes, it is an amazing paint. And super fun to work with. Now I feel like I have to figure out where I'm going to put my Hold Your Blue here. We could do the canopy that way, but I don't think I want to do the canopy that way. Okay. Anyway, back to the action. Quickly go through and do this. I think I'm going to do this too. Just because I don't like the solid white, so I'm going to split. I want to split those panels, I think. And maybe that's where our holder will go. Mimic what we did on the V19s with their laser cannons. So if we fill this out, do that. Come down here, that. There we go. Alright, so let's say we do that. It's looking pretty cool. We have some good contrast. Hold Your Blue. I thought I took you out. I would never start. There we go. Alright, here it is. Hold Your Blue. So, I think what we're going to do is we're just going to use this as like a contrasting blue. Somewhat like we did on the V19s. I'm not going to thin it out too much because I want it to remain pretty dark. I think what we're going to do here is we're just going to come in. We're going to hit these areas on the wings with it. Ooh, so rich. Alright, and then we'll come over here and hit these. Also just add that little extra color variance. That will hopefully make everything pop, and then we can go back through with the silver and kind of pick out that. And then do we want to do anything on the top here? I think we're going to do this little panel. And then this little panel here. Just to give us a little bit of that contrast. And I think we're going to do, yeah, we're going to do it. We'll do these little like over things on the guns. Cannons, not guns. Every time. Gets me every time. And then if we don't like that, we can always go back through and paint them black as well. But that might add some nice like contrast. We'll see when we add in the dark colors for the cannons themselves. Do we want to do anything else to that? I'm actually pretty happy with this. So it will come. It will come for those who have ordered Hold Your Blue based on how much we use it. It's worth the wait. It's a great color. It can do a lot of stuff. All right, now we're just thinking about what else we want to do. I think we're happy with that. So for the moment, we're going to call that good. Let's go in and we're going to grab some blue wash, which of course don't have out because why be prepared? That's silly. Wash. that one. So we're going to take some Inktense Cyan. So you look at my poor ship that we haven't painted the belly on yet. We're just going to make up a quick wash. And we're going to go through and we're going to shade all of our blue areas. And then we can go back through if we want to or feel like we need to. And we can reclaim some of it if we get a little too dark. But this will just add a little bit of that contrast shading that we want. Just deepen up these colors a little bit. It's the exact same process that we use on the V19s. So we started with that turquoise, and then we went through, washed them with our little blue cyan blue wash. And then we just went back through again and picked out some of the highlights of that color. We could also do this over the Huldra, but honestly the Huldra is so rich, you probably wouldn't even notice it too much. But it wouldn't hurt anything. Again, just keeping that pretty thin. You can, of course, this brush really doesn't want to cooperate today in terms of keeping a point. So we're going to switch it out. So you just want to keep that wash nice and thin and smooth in its application. Let it run into the cracks and crevices. Don't let it pool. We're not really interested in super stark kind of pooling and stuff. When it comes to the color, you can let it run into the cracks between the panels if you want to. Again, we're just going to go back through with some black and knock those panel lines out anyway. So we do it now or we do it later or we mix the blue with the black, it's not really going to make a huge amount of difference. All we really want to do is just make sure that we're not letting it pool and it's not hitting that white, because if it hits our white color, it's going to not be impossible to clean off, but it'll be tricky to clean off. So a little bit of a careful hand, just taking that extra time, make sure it's going where we want it to, is important. Here. Again, experimentation and practice is going to be your friend if you've never done this before. You know, let yourself take the successes that you have. Count every finished miniature as, you know, a win. You're not always going to achieve everything that you wanted with every miniature. Every time you sit down to paint, more often than not, you're going to wind up saying, well, I wish I'd done this differently, or I wish I had seen more success here, or this had come out better. And that's okay. That's part of the hobby. It's part of learning. You come back in next time, and on your next mini, you're gonna do that better. You're gonna do that different. It's always gonna be a journey of self-improvement. That's why the hobby's so cool and why we do it. No different than when you go to the game store and you play X-Wing or Legion or any of the other games, and you don't do as well as you'd hoped. You learn from the experience. You figure out new tactics and tricks to do better. You go back and you improve. We're swapping that out. Okay. So our blue's done. It's looking pretty good. We'll let that wash dry really quick. Of course, we'll have to do the underside as well. How much time do we have left? Not enough time. I'll do the underside off camera. We're gonna grab some Moonstone. Ooh, I like this color. This is a really great, it's just a really weird kind of light gold color. I think it makes really cool canopies and visor colors and stuff. It's got a very cool, feels a little bit like a lot of modern video game sci-fi stuff where they get that really cool reflective gold glow on the reflective gold on their visors and goggles. If you snowboarded, skied, anything like that, it reminds me of the reflective films they put over ski goggles and things like that. It's pretty neat. And it plays really well with blue, obviously, being a yellow. So gold and blues really like each other. The whites really like it. Because our white has a little bit of yellow in it, it ties together really nice compositionally. And then once you hit this with a sepia wash, like a really light brown kind of ochre wash, it really starts to pop. I'm going to do our little droid in it, even though that's not the right color for him, but we can go back in and we'll fix that as well. So we do a little R2 unit, just to get a base coat started on him. And that's going to be it for that. Now let's dive in. We're going to grab a bit of just flat black, and we're going to do the cannons and the engines. So again, we're just going to come in. I'm going to hit in between the Huldra blue for the moment, and then maybe later on we'll decide the Huldra blue isn't working for us and we'll change it to all black. Maybe once everything's done, we will decide that we like it all and that compositionally it's working for us. And that's another one of the big things is, like, don't judge your piece, your mini, until everything's done. Sometimes even just having that primered base that's unfinished, even when the entire miniature is finished, can totally change the total composition of how everything ties together. So it's all little steps. Ooh, we got to do the front of the cockpit. We missed that. Let's see. So we got to get in there. But it's always important to, like, really think about the piece as a whole. And if any piece of that whole is unfinished, there's a good possibility that it can skew the overall result of the mini itself. Same with, like, you know, once you do a lot of washing and dry brushing, every paint dries to a different consistency. So you're going to get satin looks, you're going to get you're going to have paints that dry more satin, more shiny, more matte. Having that final layer of sealant, of varnish put over it, is going to make a huge amount of difference, because it's going to mute everything out. It's going to tie everything together. So you're not going to get a bunch of light glare. You're not going to get anything like weird. You're going to be able to see the piece at whole. So it is really important that you kind of keep that in mind as you move forward. And the other thing is that every miniature has an ugly phase. Sometimes that ugly phase is all the way to the end. So don't get down on yourself if you're like, this just doesn't look right yet. Keep working at it. Complete everything, you know. Sometimes it can be helpful if just you're not happy with an area or the way something's turning out, to just get it to a point where you're like, it's done. I don't like it, but it's done. Move on to the next stage and knock that out instead. And then see if, as you finish each stage of the mini, as you come back through, if that doesn't happen to make a really big difference in terms of the overall, like, feel and composition of the piece. Don't judge things in a vacuum. Alright, we're going to really quickly grab a little bit of brown Inktense to make a sepia wash. And so I'm just going to use a little bit of yellow and a little bit of brown. We're going to mix that together. We're going to wash this cockpit down really quick. It should be dry by now. You're going to see how this just kind of like takes it to the next level, because it's going to pop in all those recesses, kind of give us that separation, that definition. And because it's a wash, it shouldn't really coat the top of the canopies too much. So we'll get that nice, like, reflective glint surface going on, and we can always go back through and reclaim some of that just by doing another layer of our paint. We can mix in some silver if we really wanted to punch that up. So again, I'm kind of just like placing this wash really heavily along the sides of the canopy to really give it that definition. Accentuate those volumes in that crack. Come in here. these little areas, no one will ever really see those. So I think this is another one of those things where it's like, yeah, we don't need to be too careful here. That top canopy is going to be where everyone looks. So if we can make that look really, really cool and sharp, that would be cool. I think we'll be quite happy. Okay. Very happy with that. We have a few minutes left. I got some stuff to show off still, so we're going to go ahead and I'm going to grab some Garnet Alchemy, which is a nice red metallic from Scale. I'm going to do the droid really quick. So it looks like he has a little round head. So give him his round head, and then he's got his little round, his little like square section where his eye is. So we won't do too precise a look here, but we'll let that dry, and then we'll come back through and we'll kind of like block that back out. And okay, so let's do the dark lining really quick, which we probably won't get to finish, but we'll do our best. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab some pre-made black wash from Vallejo, which is right here. Woo. Put this into my palette. I'm going to grab some flat black as well. I like mixing. Oh no, paint down. That's okay. It has its cap on. I like mixing straight paint, like normal paint, into the wash for this step because you want it to really like bind well, but you also want to get that good flow. And so using a mixture of pre-made wash or ink and normal paint will give you a really nice kind of almost like a quill and ink consistency. So it'll flow really nicely, but it will also bind really well and have a nice good opacity that a normal wash might not. So again, with this, we're just going to kind of come through, and if you have it flowing really well, and this is kind of like the big trick, you shouldn't really have to draw it in. You should just be able to kind of touch where those lines are, and the capillary action of the paint will take over, and it will hit those areas. And you can do this with an oil wash if you have access to oil paints. I want to do it that way. Biggest trick here, and see, so what we have going on is it's not quite toothy enough. So I'm going to grab more flat black and less of the ink. And we're just going to try to thicken it up a little bit. It's a really fine line to get the paint to flow into the panel line, but also not be so watered down that it doesn't actually cause the panel line to stand out. So if you have it right, these panel lines are nice and deep. It should be pretty easy to simply touch the brush of the Mini and watch as the capillary action takes care of most of the work for you. And of course, it being thin also means that if you do make a mistake, it's really easy to go in and erase the issue. Of course, like we can add definition around the R2 unit. We can give him his little R2 eye if we want. And we'll just do this anywhere where we want separation between those panel lines. You could do this with a straight wash too. The thing you want to be careful with a wash though is obviously you don't want to tint the surface. You just want this to be like the nice separating line between the two panels. So you don't want to put it everywhere. Doing a pin wash like this is definitely the way you want to go. And it's going to take you a little time, but the results are going to be well worth it. You don't even have to do a lot of the other steps that we did. You can use just flat colors. I mean, cell shading and animation artwork works exactly like this, right? It's just flat colors separated by a really strong, clean black line, so that the eye can see the differences in form and all of that stuff. So be bold with this. If there's one technique that you work on, dark lining is the one that I highly recommend, because it's going to take all of the stuff you do, miniatures related wise, to that next level. Solid base coating is the first, and then dark lining is the second. Go that way, over here, and again, you can do all the panel lines, you can do none of the panel lines, but hitting these panel lines is going to make a really big difference to getting all those things clean. And if you go too far, you can always go back. Like here, this panel line is really not cooperating with me, so I can always go back and reshade with the color. One of the things you'll notice is your eye is really good at picking out those dark lines. So even if your line's a little thicker than you want it initially, if you leave it and go back to that section, you're gonna not notice it as much, because your eye is just gonna parse that section as a different part. Hopefully you can already see how much of a difference even this little step is making to your eye's ability to read all these different spots. It naturally adds this crazy amount of like highlighting and separation between the two panels. You know, even when you have flat colors going on, it's still going to look much different. And if you want to do anything that's like cell shaded or comic book style or anything like that, the dark lining is the core. It's like the heart and soul of making those effects work. And it's really not a difficult step, because again, you're just thinning down that paint so it flows and then running it into those panel lines, and the right amount of paint will mostly take care of itself. It comes down to it. And this is a step that you can really get, you know, you can zen in, and you can just kind of like lock yourself in and start loving. I'll come back just because I'm finicky here. I want to go here and a little bit of separation between the red of our droid's head and his eyeball. So down here, here. Not that anyone will see it, but it bothers me, so I'm going to do it. Alright, and then we're even going to go in and we will hit this canopy as well. Even though we use the wash to kind of separate everything out. Going back through and doing those canopy lines again will really help as well. And I think that'll take us to our time. So we'll finish this off camera so it's ready for its opportunity to be played on stream, hopefully sometime in the next couple months. And we'll start cranking out more in-person gaming now that folks are having their opportunities to get vaccinated and able to safely do so. A lot of people have been waiting a long time. Kind of get back to the stores or get back to the table, have your normal opponents come over and have a good time. So that's what all the painting is ultimately leading towards. Is is a chance to play some games with all the cool stuff that we've been working on. That. And then, what else we got? So come over here and hit those. Those. Oh, let's get down here. Color up. And then do some really quick kind of spot highlight right there with some normal Moonstone. Okay, and just because we can come over here and just kind of edge out these panels really quick, just so we can tell if we need to go back on those wings or not. This is kind of one of those steps where it's like, I'm not sure if I'm feeling the wing yet, but once we do this panel separation and it's not quite as muddy, I will have a much better sense as to if the color choices we made on the wings is making me happy or not. That looks pretty good. We do need to go in and just add a little bit of metallic, I think, to the wing folds, but there we go. That is our time. Not bad. We'll have to do a little bit on the underside, just add in the blues, but I think that's a pretty slick looking Aayla Secura. Yeah, and Eta-2, and there we go. There's her wingmate. So she is mostly all ready to go, ready to fly in style. Let's see if I can get, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I have enough fingers. Do I have enough fingers? I can do it. We got fingies. Oh, we get the glamour shot. There we go. There's the whole there's the whole wing. So pretty fun and exciting. Let me pull this camera over to here. Boop. All right, well, I hope you enjoyed that. I hope you were inspired. Can't wait to see what everyone does with their repaints and stuff. It's a super fun time to go in and kind of just customize your squadrons, whether you're giving them the normal squadron markings, changing red squadron to blue squadron, or going in and doing something way more customized and just overtaking the whole menu with brand new colors. It's very easy to do and super fun. Speaking of people who have gone in and customized things, I have a couple of images to show you all. These are not from X-Wing. They are from Star Wars Legion, but for those who have been following us for a while, you know we did our hashtag My Star Wars Legion painting challenge. So we asked folks over the last 6 weeks to show us their favorite commanders or the commanders that they painted for Legion. And we as a staff went through and we picked out 6 of those. I'm going to show 3 today. John Schaefer is going to show 3 more on Friday at 1 p.m. Pacific when he does his painting stream. So let's go ahead and just take a look at the first one. So the first one, of course, we got to go with my boy General Grievous here. Fantastically painted. I love the strong colors in the cloak. We have a really nice dark blue black that it works so beautifully with the red underneath. And of course that hot red works really well with the cream colors of the armor and all that stuff. So this all ties together to make a really striking miniature that looks really formidable, looks really regal, and I think really captures everything about Grievous. And of course the eye work is great as well. Following Grievous, we have the man himself, Darth Vader. So again, black can be a really challenging color sometimes to get correct or to figure out, especially when it comes to all the different types. So we saw a really great blue-black. Here we have a really great saturated black that I think works really well for Darth Vader. It's got a little bit of brown in it. You have the tans. It's just this really muted color. And then, of course, it's all pulled together by this nice OSL effect where the lightsaber gives that hint of glow that even transcends down to the base. And that's an element that I think really pulls everything together and tells a story that's super awesome. So this was a really fun Vader to look at, and you can just see the menace off of him. And it's just a really cool piece. And last but not least, we have this clone Captain Rex, who has a little bit of conversion work done on him as well. You'll see he has the jetpack on him. So I think this is a really cool use of a couple of different minis and pulling everything together. Of course, I love the chipping and the weathering on the white. White can be a tricky one to do, but adding that extra life into the armor itself, getting the markings on there, the choice of blues, using that more turquoise color, everything comes together to just make a really cool looking Captain Rex. So I really liked this one as well. Captain Rex being one of my favorite characters from the Clone Wars series. Who doesn't like Captain Rex? He's a true angel. He's a true joy. Fantastic work here again. So a really easy pick for us to make. It was just a blast. So of course there are 3 more picks to come. Those will be on Friday at 1 p.m. with John Schaefer, who will be doing his own Star Wars painting. I'm not entirely sure what he has on the tap for this Friday, but definitely check it out and tune in. And of course we have our own creative director Dallas Kemp coming back tomorrow for more hobby and painting at 1 p.m. Pacific as well. With that, thank you so much for joining me on this Wednesday. I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week and a beautiful weekend. I can't wait to see you all back here next Tuesday at 1 p.m. Pacific for our first stream of the week, and then of course more Star Wars painting for me on Wednesday at 1 p.m. Pacific as well. Until then, stay safe, stay beautiful, be good to each other, and have a wonderful day, folks. Goodbye!